Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of CA Overwatch. We have a very special guest with us today. As always, I am your host, Spencer, other host, Chris, and with us today is Ben. Ben, how's it going?
Yeah, I'm doing great. How you guys doing?
We're doing great, man. So for those of you who don't know, and I mean, Ben, you can obviously talk about it, just for a brief introduction. Ben currently works at Amuka Esports, which is just like, and correct me if I'm wrong, like an investing sort of venture capitalist firm in the esports industry right now. So if anyone's really interested in like the business side of esports, this is the show for you. So Ben, just give us a quick little introduction and let's go from there.
Yeah, sure. So I run a company called Amuka Esports. We're a vertically integrated esports company that invests and acquires companies in media, content, merchandise, lifestyle, tournament organizers, basically anything that services the amateur or casual gaming market.
Okay,
Awesome.
Interesting.
So, Ben, I just had a quick question. So you're like guessing an avid gamer. You've been gaming all your life. Is that correct?
I have since I was 5. Yeah, 1988.
Oh,
First time I
wow.
picked up a controller.
What type of console was around back then? I'm just trying to think. We had the Nintendo 64 back in like 97 or 8.
Yeah, so first console was the original Nintendo. I think it came out in 80, 83 or 84, around that time.
That's pretty awesome. Now, when I think of most people's, I guess, journey with gaming, I've never really heard of somebody who's been extremely interested in gaming, but then gone to kind of like the business and investment side of things. So what really led you? What really led you there?
Yeah, I think, my passion is I've always loved playing video games. I love playing games with my kids as well.
Yeah.
And as I, in my career, moved into the investment banking scene, started getting involved with esports companies, helping them raise, and then saw really two interesting problems. One, I saw a lot of early stage esports entrepreneurs really had no access to capital because, angel investors don't understand esports yet. And the very few esports VCs like your Trust or your Bitcraft, you're way too early, you're way too Canadian, and there's just no access to capital. So, I kept seeing so many great companies, so many great opportunities that are early and just no one was taking advantage of. And I think that's where Amuka Esports, the genesis of the company came in to say, let's create a company that's in the community, that incubates, starts, creates, invests, acquires, whatever is needed to get some of these great esports companies up and running. And we're going to build them out into our portfolio.
Awesome.
That's pretty interesting because whenever I ask most people what like they think of esports, they say what's esports.
Yeah.
Still a lot of people don't really know about it, so it makes sense why there'd be like not a lot of capital in that area. Now, do you think that there is like almost a lack of business experience leaders as well in the esports industry?
So firstly, I just want to touch on your last point because I think it's important to say is, why do investors have objections to esports? And I think it comes from two big misconceptions. One is, and I'm sure you guys get it a lot too, people just say, I don't get how people watch people play video games. And that it's, right? They poo-poo it, that it's just, they can't understand it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I always like to bring in poker. Do you guys play poker at all?
Yep.
Okay.
Dibble dabble?
Dibble dabble poker. So I don't know if you remember, maybe it was 10 years ago, poker came on television. Are you guys privy to that? Were you around when?
I mean, I never knew the significance of it first coming to television, but I've definitely watched and have previously watched and continue to watch, like the World Series of Poker and stuff like that on TV.
Yeah, so there was a time when poker was not on TV, and that's sort of poker. And when poker came on, you heard a lot of the same complaints. People saying, poker's not a sport, and why is it on television, and how can you watch other people play cards?
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, it just comes down to poker nailed down the viewing experience, right? Like, would you guys go to a casino and stand behind people and watch them play poker without just like that, like without seeing their cards or anything like that? Like, would that be exciting?
I mean, depending on the size of the poker tournament, right?
Yeah,
like, I think people still go watch it live, obviously. But I know what you mean. Just your average everyday person, no.
Yeah, so they put cameras under the cards. They calculated the mathematical percentages, and they made
Yeah.
watching poker like a card game that no one was playing way back in the day, made it a cool sport.
Mm-hmm.
Esports isn't there yet, and I think that's where investors get hung up on is they can't just be flipping through Twitch and put on an Overwatch game and be like, "Oh, I get it."
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
it's a really cool thing to bring up. Like I know, so one of the things that kind of got my start in the industry was I was at Durham College when they first put together their arena. Like I don't know if you had a chance to check out Durham College's esports gaming arena, but it's like fantastic.
So
It's super
I have,
cool.
and I will just plug, if you don't mind, November 9th and 10th, we are doing the Amuka Smash Cup at Durham College.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, we saw that in the
And-
email. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, for those of you who are interested in Smash, definitely check that out. We'll be like streaming anywhere on Twitch, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So we can put send us like the link after the call. We'll put it in the description so people can check it out if they're interested in it. But yeah, anyways, I was like one of the people who helped put together like the RFP. Ensuring that all the specs were like up to date and competitive. And like when you were talking to like some of the people higher up who were kind of like, well, I don't really get why people would watch, other people play video games. Like I think the best example was always just relating it back to sports. It's like, why watch someone play basketball when you can play basketball yourself? Oh, because you're not as good as LeBron James and you want to see the best people. You know what I mean? Like any answer that you would ever have to that question, just apply it to esports. And it's like essentially the same thing. And I do agree that the viewing experience is also a bigger portion of it. So I like that you brought that up as well.
Yeah, no, it's a great point to bring it back. Everyone gets the esports when you remove the E in it's sports.
Exactly.
I always like to throw it when I speak to older investors who have kids. I like to sort of make it personal and say that, you know what? There's a whole generation of kids who didn't fit into traditional sports.
Yeah.
A whole generation who were left out and didn't have confidence and missed out on so many opportunities because there's limitations in physical sports.
Exactly.
And by bringing in esports, you're empowering a whole generation of kids who didn't have these opportunities before to be successful and build confidence and succeed in something. And I think that pinpoint when they think about their kids is, well, a lot of parents say, okay, now I get it.
Yeah, and I completely agree because I think the mentality behind why someone would enjoy sports and esports is the same, right? Like us as humans, we enjoy competition, right? We enjoy the camaraderie of it. Like all of that is transferable between sports and esports, but you're right. It's like it hits a different demographic that couldn't use that towards traditional sports because it didn't have that experience, and it just doubles it tenfold. So it's a really interesting way to spin it. And I agree. I agree with that. And I like that. That's where it's going to go moving forward. I think the other interesting part is like if you want to talk about the potential growth of the esports industry as a whole. I think we're all in agreement that it's fairly in its infancy. Chris and I were doing the CBC interview for when they did the Toronto Defiant, and they announced that they were doing the homestand at Roy Thompson Theater. And I always laugh because the guy doing the interview was kind of like, "Hey guys, I just said, I've never owned a console, right? Like I'm not a gamer, so like don't judge me, please." It was like a joke, but it got me thinking. Like, esports is already so big, and to kind of put in perspective where it can grow, there's going to come a time where like that person doesn't exist, or if they do, it's in the vast minority where like you're not going to have like half the population, if not more, be like, yeah, I grew up like casually playing like Pong here or there, or not owning a console. There's going to be a time where every single person grew up owning, or at the very least being familiar with this industry, and I think that's really when it's going to hit its stride, like just to kind of put in perspective how big this thing can grow.
I agree, and that time is going to be when there's going to be a person out there that's going to say, "What's a movie?"
Yeah,
exactly. That's how big esports is going to be.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, the growth can definitely can skyrocket for sure.
Now, when you're thinking of esports growing right now, what do you think is kind of one of the major challenges and hurdles that esports has to overcome right now, apart from you mentioning making like esports more relatable?
Right. Okay, great question. I'm trying to think how I want to unpack it.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. Look, I just generally, and again, it comes down to where our whole investment thesis lies, is just I believe in the amateur gaming ecosystem.
Absolutely.
That's going to drive it. There's only so many pro teams you can have. There's only so many franchises. And I'm not saying these franchises won't be worth more and they're good businesses. I'll save that discussion for after. But there's just a limit to what you can do there. But it's unlimited, the amount of, the potential for the amateur gamers. And I think People, so that pie is what's going to grow, and I think people are focusing on it. And if you look at the publicly traded esports companies in the U.S., Super League Gaming and Allied Esports, it's exactly that. It's it's a venue and it's an amateur gaming ecosystem.
Yeah.
Where teams and franchises will go, we don't know. I mean, the problem is that a lot of them are owned by billionaires, so we they don't really care if it's a good business model per se. Like, I don't think Bob Kraft will lose sleep over if his Boston Overwatch franchise doesn't make money, or Jerry Jones. So we need to see some publicly traded esports teams and companies. We got to understand the marketplace better. And then I think we can start to gauge what are these teams worth, and is it a viable business model?
See, it's interesting because there's a couple of really cool points there that I agree with and want to bring up. One of which being, I do think I agree. I think the biggest areas that are falling behind, I think esports has obviously grown and people kind of like where that's going, but I think the amateur scene as well as the college scene are the two scenes that have sort of lagged behind in esports industry as a whole. When you look at like tier 2, tier 3, I mean, obviously we're more familiar with Overwatch, but it's an issue across all sort of platforms, is having a solid like development system for these players to kind of get into and grow, as well as like NCAA, right? Like I know they're starting to grow now, right? You have a couple leagues coming up now, and it's exciting to see, but I still think that has room. The other thing is, in terms of like who's running the businesses and all that stuff, I think that's going to come. Like I still think Robert Kraft cares if his business makes money. I mean, I know he has a ton of money and stuff like that, but I still think that they want it to succeed and they want to make money. But it's going to be interesting to see where that progresses.
I guess, just to rephrase, you're right. Of course, billionaires care about the money just as much as everyone else. I mean, he can go a long time losing money.
No, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
He's in it for the very, very long haul, right? So he's got a little bit of a different investment time horizon than maybe everybody else does.
It's also,
for sure.
Yeah, it's also crazy to think about, just in terms of grassroots development, how much better the player base for all these different esports is going to get over time. Like, if you think about it, the pro football players, the pro hockey players, they've had a coach and been on a team since they were like 3, 4, 5. But if you're thinking about the pro esports players, these are just guys that just, played, figured it out on their own, and then got to where they were. If we set up a proper grassroots system where you have like these established games in different age brackets, I don't know if it'll be the exact same as physical sports, but if you have a similar setup where people are getting nurtured throughout their whole lifetime until they become pro, you can see the caliber of player I feel like it's going to increase immensely.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think we have to have that infrastructure that takes you from recreational to high school to collegiate, and that doesn't exist now. I guess the challenge, like for you guys being in the Overwatch community especially, is just like, what happens if something else comes that, what if there's an Overwatch killer, and there's just another game that replaces it? Where does that leave the Overwatch community? Is it vulnerable to new games shaking up the marketplace? I'm curious what you guys think.
So like in terms of, absolutely. I think I always say the biggest challenge in esports right now is convincing people to continue watching a sport after they stop playing the game, right? Like, I always lay it back from me to Rainbow Six. I was playing Rainbow Six Siege from launch. I watched, a lot of the pro players and a lot of the pro scrims and stuff like that when I was playing the game. And then Fortnite came out, kind of drew my attention, and then I started playing Overwatch, and then all of a sudden I stopped watching Rainbow Six competitive altogether, right? I still love the game, but I just don't follow it anymore because I stopped playing. So, and I always relate to traditional sports, right? Whereas, like, I stopped playing basketball when I was like 14 years old, but I still watch the Toronto Raptors, right? Like, I haven't played hockey in like 10 years, but I still watch the Montreal Canadiens or the Toronto Maple Leafs, whichever you're a bigger fan of. So I think that's the biggest issue in gaming right now. I think it's going to be hard for somebody to sit back and be like, hey, I think Overwatch is going to be playable in the next 100 years, right? That's a stretch and a half. So I think the biggest way to combat that is why I love franchising personally. I think that's why I've always been a big fan and proponent of franchising, and it actually brings me back to something I wanted to talk about in your previous point that I kind of spaced on, so I brought the Robert Kraft thing. The valuation of esports franchises, I think, is the biggest part. I think there are people who are like knocking the idea of franchising, and they're getting it confused with esports franchises potentially being like overvalued currently, with the idea of franchising being a bad idea. So in terms of like where would that leave the Overwatch community? If it's strong enough, I think it survives, and if not, then I think a lot of people will transition to different games. I mean, you saw that with TF2, right? Like Team Fortress 2 was the big game. Overwatch came out, kind of killed Team Fortress 2, and then a lot of those players just became Overwatch pros, right? A lot of the community from TF2 moved over to Overwatch. I think that's what you're kind of going to see. But I think games need to figure out how to keep the viewership past people stop playing the game, and I think that franchising is the way to go about it.
Right. So I think, with pro sports, there isn't really a risk that there's going to be a new pro sport that's going to kill hockey and kill basketball.
Yeah.
But what I think would make me more comfortable if I was a franchise owner, and I do agree for team games, when you look at all the evidence, it looks like the franchise model is probably better. But I would want to see, instead of investing in a game, invest in a franchise with Blizzard. Like Blizzard should package it as, hey guys, we're in this together. It's Overwatch today. We may develop a new game that's even cooler, but you're our partners. Bobcraft, Boston, you guys got whatever we pull out, you're in it with us. And I think that would have been, a better business model. I think as an owner, I'd feel better knowing that, okay, I'm investing in Blizzard. They're one of the best, game publishers out there, and maybe they'll come up with a new game. It doesn't matter. So I'll have a franchise in that one. And, instead of right now where you have the first rights to the new franchise and it may not be valued well. And
so it's just crazy. It's interesting because, sorry, Chris, you can go. I was cutting you up there.
No, I was just gonna say it's crazy how much franchises are dependent on like a title or a single company. The Toronto Defiance. I believe like $20 million was paid for the franchise.
Yeah, and the Call of Duty one's 25.
And then Call of Duty's 25, and they're purely dependent on the fact that they're hoping the community base is going to stay there. So I totally agree with that.
I think that I think it's interesting to bring up the idea of partnering with Blizzard themselves as opposed to having an individual franchise. Like you didn't limit yourself though to, because like obviously Blizzard comes out with something cool and that's the game that takes over. Like it works out perfectly, right? And I mean you're betting on Blizzard. It's not like it's a pretty safe bet in terms of like studios are going to put out high quality games.
You're hedging your bet. Look, there's basically like three to five really game publishers. Okay. Yeah. And Tencent pretty much covers most of them. So I rather just pick one of the top 3 game publishers and invest there. So at least I know whatever, if it's a new MOBA, if it's a new FPS, whatever it is, I got a franchise in that ecosystem.
So is that like lead to your frustrations? Which I know a couple of people were talking about on Twitter with like the Call of Duty franchise leagues, where you saw like one company would own an Overwatch franchise in Vancouver, for instance, and then that same company would own a Call of Duty franchise in Seattle, right? Where there wasn't that necessary crossover. Or sometimes like some companies own one in Call of Duty and not Overwatch, or vice versa. So is that
right? I think the only sort of weird one I believe is with NRG. That's San Fran for Overwatch, and they are Chicago for COD.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that is bizarre. It's like
and I think
the Toronto
London
Canadians and the Toronto, like the Leafs are owned by one and the Habs own the other Toronto franchise.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. It's also like I think there was like one London franchise is owned by Cloud9 and the Call of Duty one's owned by something different or something like that. Like it's kind of the same thing, which I don't mind as much because like you look at MLSE, they don't own every Toronto Pro franchise, so I think that's as big of a deal. But still, I know what you mean. It's interesting. I've never thought of it that way in terms of population, like building yourself with a publisher.
I personally think League did it better, by keeping the team names and not being geolocated like that. Like you still have all the benefits of the franchise model. It's organized. For the most part, there's less drama, although this year maybe it was a little bit different.
Yeah.
And teams can retain their brand, and like I get it when Nate Shot makes that bold statement by saying, "Look, we're a global brand. How can we pin ourselves down into one local market and potentially alienate our millions and millions of supporters?" So that's something the franchise model I think is going to have to come to terms with.
This is like an interesting conversation because I mean I saw Nate Shot's comments obviously when he refused to go to the Call of Duty World League. I don't know. I don't fully, I don't fully agree with it. Like personally, I think that you don't like necessarily tie yourself down to like. I agree with the idea of building your franchise, having it geolocated so you garner that attention from the fans. Like the LA Lakers are geolocated to LA, but let's not act like there's not a ton of LA fans across the world, right? I have a lot of friends who are Madrid fans or Arsenal fans or Barcelona fans. I have a ton of people who support the Lakers or the Golden State Warriors. Like you can still build your brand globally while having it tied down to geolocation. I think you just need to understand that esports, maybe more than traditional sports, is more built around content creation than simply like going out there and just, playing the game. Like I like the idea of having your franchise geolocated and then putting a lot of effort into the marketing and building the brands of your players. Like if I had to relate the Overwatch League, or at least I think the way to succeed, I've said this before on the show, like I put it towards like the NBA, or I put it towards even sort of like combat sports, right? Where your marketability is like directly tied to your brand. And also the NBA, you get the fact that it's geolocated as well.
Right. So I think, like the Lakers, for example, are not looking to build out their brand in Toronto. Like they're not looking to do events and build that strong Laker brand in Toronto and Boston. Mm-hmm. Like they are now limited to building that brand, at least in North America within LA. And then maybe they try to build it globally. I think that's where he's saying he's worried about his problem. Like that's like their issue that they're facing is if we're connecting a brand to a city, and now there's rival cities with our competitors, how do we then move that brand to another city? Like, how do you export, the NRG brand to Toronto? What could they do here? Right? Or to Vancouver?
Yeah, that's a good question.
So I think that's the challenge they would struggle with is how do you build that global brand if then you're tied down to it? So yeah, I mean, it's a good discussion point. I don't know. There's no answer.
It is no answer. It's just up to the person, their goals and their beliefs. Truly.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because I definitely see both sides. I like the idea of getting people engaged by I want to watch Toronto play Overwatch, so I'm going to follow that. I also see the idea of it is limiting in some respects, for sure. I get that.
But you could also say, so what? So it's limiting. Like Toronto's a huge market. Like so great. Overactive media will have a dominant control over a big market, and that's enough. Like why does every company need to be a global brand and
you can also
in every city? You could just say it's good. Like it's a good model. We're here in Toronto. We're building it. They're in Titans. We're in Vancouver. And we're building it, and that's it. Like
you can also separate the 100 Thieves logo and brand appeal from the Call of Duty league in which you're tied to, right? Like it's not like 100 Thieves. You know what I mean? Like the company would own both of them, but they can still be separate entities in itself. But just to let you guys know, we're at the 22-minute mark. So Chris, I don't know if you want to get into like maybe more stuff because I love this conversation, but we're just running out of time here.
I just wanted to touch on a couple things, bring back to Amuka Esports.
Exactly, I agree.
I just wanted to know, I guess, what are your guys' criteria for, finding and selecting a company that you think will be successful in the future? I mean, apart from the classic like financial requirements.
Yeah, very easy. Grit and hustle.
Yeah.
I don't need to look at a fancy deck. I don't need to understand your complex SaaS company. Basically, I sit down with an entrepreneur and I can look him or her in the eyes and know in 2 seconds whether they're in it to win it. And those are those types of people that we're investing in. We're investing in people. And that's why whether it's, one of them is Accelerate Gaming, one of the top teams in the FGC, whether it's a podcast called The Center Ring, one of the top North America's top esports podcasts. These are people that are passionate about it. And, I think they have to be coachable. You have to be willing to put in the hours, make the commitments, be passionate about your product or service. And, that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, there's definitely, you could tell a difference between a person who is doing maybe something, even though it's simply because they see a business opportunity, and then somebody who, maybe like he was been playing video games since they were 5 and thought they wanted to, do something bigger in this area and help develop it.
Yeah, we hope to be that complement. Like I think a lot of esports entrepreneurs are passionate about their company. They're passionate about what they do. But to be frank, like you don't know how to run a business. And
exactly.
I think that's where we come in sort of on that incubation, is to say, okay, great, that's your passion. You have the vision. I want you to execute on it, but like, here's how we can make this a business.
You know what? I think that's very interesting and unique to esports as well, because it's an industry that's still young and not mature. There are a lot of areas for growth in terms of management in business acumen.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think what's even easier, and I think moving forward, what we're really trying to do is, like, we know sort of what's missing in the market. It's very obvious what's missing in the Toronto market or in different local esports markets. And we're just going to create those companies, hire CEOs, and be a little bit more like what BigCraft was, a couple of years ago, is incubating companies, finding the ideas that are underserved, hiring CEOs and management teams to run them, and then finding them and getting them off.
Interesting. So just to kind of, I guess a lot of people, it's no secret that a lot of people are looking to get into the esports industry, right? You get a lot of kids coming into university, coming out of high school, who are like, I want to enter this industry. I just wanted to get your thoughts on, outside of just hustle, maybe what skill sets, if you have any advice to those kids coming out of university or coming out of high school, or getting into high school, advice for them to get into this industry that a lot of people are very passionate about. And then twofold question, maybe explain some of the different positions that you currently have at Amuka Esports, right? Maybe some of the skill sets people in your team bring to the table, outside of obviously have a good work ethic and work hard and have hustle and passion.
Sure. So I'll touch on the second one first.
Okay.
So we have 4 companies. One is Organized Gaming. It's a esports lifestyle brand. So they have video content, podcast, merchandise, and so they're building out that line. Company number 2, Basement Gaming, event organizer. They bring esports to non-esports venues, trampoline parks, bowling centers. The idea that if you don't need to be a LAN center, we can bring the esports to you. So that's the concept with Basement Gaming. Axel Gaming is a team, but really it's a brand in the fighting game community. And TCR is one of the top esports podcasts. If we had more time, I'd tell that story. But I do want to be able to leave your listeners with some practical tips. And I think just some general misconceptions is, like, scale is not the answer to your problem. Like, a lot of people just think, oh yeah, like, once we scale, then we'll make money. No, if it can't make money with 1,000 users, I'm not convinced it's going to make money with 10,000 or 100,000. And people can't assume that, like, I hear this all the time and it irritates me so much. Like, oh yeah, once we scale this, then we'll be good. Like, no, prove that it works now with a smaller batch of people. And if you can't make money now, then I'm not convinced you're going to make money there.
Yeah. And I just wanted a quick comment on that. It's that's shown in the general, like, investor interest as well, especially with the failed WeWork IPO recently. And also, like, all the startups who have had IPOs who have gone down in stock price with, a bad balance sheet. It's shown in general investor relation, which is really interesting.
Yeah. So just, I guess, to build on that, since we're talking about overpriced companies like WeWork, although shamelessly, I'm sitting as a hypocrite. I'm sitting in a WeWork right now as we talk. But with it's okay, they can't hear me, and I would say it to their face anyway. With valuations, look, your PowerPoint presentation investor deck is not worth $1 million. It's not worth $2 million. And, like, take it down. Like, get money in the door, build it out. Stop being like equity hogs. Like, be in it for the long term. Like, so many, we made the mistake with a company that, wanted to go to the market at $3 million pre-money on nothing, on just an idea, and eventually it failed our due diligence and we didn't do it. But you got to be realistic. Like, and I think people just think esports, I'm worth a lot, and, like, good luck. Like, you're just not going to get funded. So you can either spin your wheels there or be realistic, take down your valuation, get some money in, prove everybody wrong, and then raise at a higher valuation.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's at such an infancy stage right now. I think sometimes people think esports is further along than it is in terms of, like, their evaluations. Like, it's esports definitely has a lot of room to grow before people kind of get a good sense of, like, the landscape.
And unlike, prop tech or clean tech or other industries, there is no proof that any of these business models, the traditional esports, teams and things like that work. So we have to be even more skeptical of esports companies because there isn't any really product or market validation for a lot of the models. So that's just one thing to consider if you're an esports entrepreneur out there.
Awesome. So, I mean, just to let you know, we're at the 30-minute mark. So just I just want to say real quickly, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it. Obviously, this isn't the normal for people listening. This isn't the normal content Chris and I bring, but we hope you enjoyed it.
It's important content.
Yeah, exactly. I love talking with the esports industry as a whole, and where we think it's going to go and stuff like that. Ben, thank you so much for coming on. Before you leave us, I mean, we've already plugged the Durham College Smash Brothers tournament. So if you guys, we'll put the link. You can check that out. Anything else you want to plug? Sort of some events you have coming up, some exciting news that you have. I'm sure our listeners would love to hear.
Yeah, sure. We have the Basement Gaming launch party, which I apologize. I think it's October 25th. It's a Friday night at the DMZ. So that's going to be a great event.
Awesome.
We're going to have a Smash tournament, Fortnite. We're bringing sort of a whole bunch of people out there. Other than that, please, my overall thesis is we are in the best industry in the world. Don't get me wrong. If I sounded down or critical about anything, it's really just because I'm all about sorting out the good from the bad.
No, exactly.
And making sure, we put together the best companies and go to market with them. But I'm the biggest bull on the industry, and I'm in it for the rest of my life.
No, I think all of us are passionate about the industry, right? All of us want to see it grow. All of us have faith, but you have to be skeptical, right? Otherwise you leave yourself open, for like mistakes and stuff like that you just don't want to do. So again, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciated having you. It was a very interesting conversation.
Great
and
chatting with you guys.
Are you going to be at EGLX at all, or your team? Anyone from your team at EGLX?
Yes, we're sending the full organized gaming team. They're going to be shooting some content, interviewing some of the top players and streamers there. So we'll definitely have a presence. I'm also going to be at DreamHack Atlanta in November. And we're sending our TCR crew out to BlizzCon. And I think that's it for the year. Those are the bigger events, yeah.
Awesome. Nice. So for people listening, Chris and I will also be at EGLX. So you want to follow Organized Gaming on Twitter, follow us on Twitter. We'd love to meet up and chat for anyone going there. Awesome. Thank you very much.
We'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, we'll talk to you next time. Have a good.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right. Bye.